Hey everybody, this is Tosin with Focus Fire, bringing you another hero guide, and this one is how to play Sonya. Now, a lot of people think Sonya is just utter trash. People talk about tier lists and stuff like that, and everybody repeats what they hear in stream chats and all that, so don't be fooled. Sonya definitely has her place in the Nexus. Like a lot of underrated heroes, it's all about knowing their strengths and weaknesses. A lot of the time, they can be weak based on what comp you're fighting, or what comp you're playing with, but they can also be really strong based on those things as well. So I'm going to quickly go over her strengths and weaknesses so you have a better understanding of how this hero works and what she's good at and what she's bad at. So firstly, she has amazing self-sustain in lane. She has no mana, so she doesn't have to worry about backing to refill her mana periodically. She can clear waves all she wants because of the Fury system. And she can also heal herself with Whirlwind constantly to sustain herself in lane as well. Next, she has huge burst potential, especially later game with talents that increase Slam's damage and reduce its cost. But on top of that, she can have constant damage output. Because her primary damaging ability, Seismic Slam, has no cooldown. It's purely based on Fury, so as long as you can keep generating Fury, you can keep Slam spamming, and you have a constant high damage output. Next strength is, Sonya is a tank slayer. A lot of heroes have trouble plowing through tanks' health. But because Sonya has a pretty good amount of health herself, she doesn't have to fear being on them or having the warrior in their face usually like a squishy would. If you're a squishy assassin, a lot of the time you want to hang back. But Sonya's like, bring it on, mofo, and just charge in and do tons and tons of damage to tanks because she has a constant damage output, and a tank is usually going to be easy to catch because they're not trying to kite. Now keep in mind, Sonya may be a warrior, but that doesn't mean she's a tank. She's relatively squishy compared to other tanks like ETC or Muradin, but she's, you know, somewhere in between. She has more health than like an assassin or so, but she's not super tanky by any means. However, she also does more damage than pretty much any other warrior. So she's kind of between a tank and a melee assassin, but it's really fun. Next strength is she's pretty good at countering Illidan, and you might wonder why exactly does she counter Illidan? Well, she's not much of an auto attacker. She's more about the slam spam. I think that is by far her best build, and slam is an ability, not an auto attack, so his evasion doesn't do much to it. Sure, he can spec that his evasion gives him a shield, and he takes 50% reduced damage with Sixth Sense, which a lot of Illidans do take, so it can reduce the damage from Slam, but it's usually not enough, and it doesn't last very long. If you just keep hammering away with Slams, you'll usually completely obliterate an Illidan. Especially if you land your stun on him first. That does a lot of damage in itself, especially with the Poison Spear talent. I mean, look how much a simple QW combo does. And then lastly, she's pretty damn good at roaming and ganking, especially if you know how to land your spear consistently. Just landing a simple QW combo, or even 2Ws if you can, is really strong. You can quickly dive into a fight, land your spear, and immediately turn the fight around. Our Zagara thinks he's screwed, but little does he know teammates show up, and a QW combo takes about half that Zeratul life. I mean, Sonya's burst is just crazy, especially when you get the later talents in Wrath of the Berserker. Alright, now to quickly go over the weaknesses. Heavy damage or burst compositions are your worst enemy. I don't usually pick Sonya if the enemy team has drafted multiple assassins or specialists that do damage like assassins, sort of. So if the enemy team already has a lineup like Jaina, Vala, Kael'thas, for instance, or something like that, 3 heavy damage or burst heroes, you might want to stay away from the Sonya pick because it can be pretty rough. And then, of course, Jaina herself counters almost every melee, especially the more squishy ones. It's really hard for you to get in there and do your damage when you're 35% slow all the time. And then lastly, you're very dependent on landing your spear. If you go in and you spear and you hit nothing, you're not going to get a ton of fury that you need to start doing your damage, and you're also not going to get the damage from your spear or your poison spear talent. The outcome of a fight or an engagement can be very different based on whether or not you land that spear. For instance, many times I simply won't engage if I miss my spear. I'm like, oh, I threw my spear and I missed? Screw that. Unfortunately, my Rhaegar didn't get the memo, and he went in and almost died, but luckily teammates show up and make it okay that I missed my spear, because we're able to do damage anyway. But typically, as you saw, I will just back off if I miss my spear, because suddenly I'm not confident in the engagement. Alright, so now I'm going to go over the talent build, and then I'm going to show a bunch of gameplay footage of the playstyle you should use to totally wreck face. Alright, so I'm going to go over the typical build that I use. It's the slam spam build. I find it to be the most consistent, so in general, I will take block for added survivability, and then if I don't feel that I need block, if they don't have any good auto attackers like, you know, Raynor, Vala, Nova, whatever, then a lot of the time, if I don't feel vulnerable, I'll take Shot of Fury. And then at level 4, I always take Shattered Ground for that extra splash. It's so good in team fights and sniping people through walls. And then Poison Spear, I love it. It's so powerful. Just a QW combo alone, Poison Spear into a Seismic Slam, is so much burst, even just for poking. And then I almost always take Wrath of the Berserker, because a constant 40% increased damage plus 50% reduction of CCs is insane. And you can extend the duration by constantly gaining Fury, which means it has an incredibly high uptime. You can honestly keep it up a lot of the time, long enough that the cooldown will reset a few seconds after it wears out, so it's kind of insane. I only really take Leap if it's a really high level like coordinated game, or against a few specific comps, but Wrath of the Berserker is amazing. And then Aftershock adds more slam spam power, and then Furious Blow is also incredible for that insane burst. 40% damage from Wrath of the Berserker, and then 40% damage from this. You hit like a freaking truck. I love it. I need to experiment more with No Escape. This could be good against a lot of comps where they can kite you pretty well, but generally speaking, Furious Blow is the way to go. And then at level 20, you almost always want to go Ignore Pain, because late game, you become much more vulnerable when the enemy team has more abilities and tools to blow you up. And since you're going to be in the front line, the damage reduction is pretty important. If you're just totally dominating the game and it's not even close, you can take the buffed Anger Management or Nexus Blades or something, but Ignore Pain is also always the safe route. Now, the reason I recommend the Slam Spam build over all others is because it does really crazy single target and AoE burst damage, and it does it very quickly. The auto attack build, for example, takes a while to do single target damage. You have to auto attack, move, auto attack, move, auto attack, move. It's harder to get the same amount of damage on the same target quickly. From experimenting with it, I just don't find it very good. Now I'm going to go over some playstyle tips. Now remember, of course, I said landing your spear is super important most of the time, as it generates your fury and does a lot of burst damage as well. Sometimes you can go in after missing a spear, but it's usually not a good idea. Being patient with your spear is really important. Here, I just try to shoot it ahead of where the guy's walking, but he actually was veering downward. So usually you just want to be more patient and try to get the opponent to line up in a predictable way. It's good to be patient a lot of the time and wait for the target to line up where you know you'll land your spear, because it's very important. So here, he's running in a narrow place where there's a wall to his right and a spider egg to his left. So I know he's lined up for a perfect, easy spear. You don't always have to rush it, especially when your team is there. They're going to be panicked and they're going to eventually start running in a straight line to get away from your team. So wait for them to line up, and then boom, land your spear and doom them. And especially if there's walls on the side of them. A lot of the time people are going to be running away to a place where there's walls blocking them, and they don't really have anywhere else to go or to dodge. And if they zigzag too much trying to dodge you while your teammates are around attacking them, they're going to eventually die anyway because they have to run in a straight line to get away. So unless they have a wall that they can immediately get behind after a few zigzags, most of the time people are going to eventually have to start running in a straight line. So you can wait for that moment to land a perfect spear. Here's an example where this Jaina is being surrounded and she tries to juke for a second, but then she realizes even if she keeps juking, she's going to run into this false stun and the Rhaegar and all that and die anyway. So I just waited, she did one little juke, and then I landed a spear easily. Now as for Whirlwind, a lot of people use this ability wrong, so I'm going to clarify what Whirlwind is good for. It's good for recovering your health by hitting minion waves, mainly. It's also decent for escaping when you're in too deep and you need to get out of there, and you can heal a little bit on your way out to help you survive. And it also will activate your trait, because anytime you use an ability, you get 10% movement speed. So Whirlwinding will give you that movement speed and heal you a little bit to help you escape a bad situation. Even if there's a lot of enemies stacked up, you don't Whirlwind for damage. Slamming with the level 4 talent that increases the splash damage of Seismic Slam is going to yield a lot more damage even to multiple targets than Whirlwind will do. Whirlwind is simply a defensive ability that helps you recover life and escape a little bit. And the last offensive way to use it is, you can use it if you need to get ahead of somebody, maybe to body block them, and do a little bit of damage on the way. It's like doing auto attack damage, but at least you can move past them. So let's say how that Asmodean there was trying to escape to his wall. I got to Whirlwind, do a little bit of damage while I'm getting ahead of him, but then I also body blocked him and forced him into a corner. Now let's take a general look at how you should be playing in team fights and general brawling situations. Typically you try to pick whatever squishy targets you can hit, pop Wrath of the Berserker, QW, and start going ham. And as you can see, just one QW combo does so much freaking damage to the Zeratul. And when you slam spam, you're constantly proccing your trait. So even though you have to stop to do your slam animation, at least you can get the movement speed to catch back up and keep slamming eventually. So you don't have to completely commit and dive into the middle of their team or dive into their backline. You can play safe and kite around and just hit whatever targets are immediately available. You'd rather, of course, prioritize the squishy targets, but if you're going to go too deep and die for it, then just turn around and hit whatever target you can safely swing at. Now remember I said one of Sonya's strengths is that she has never-ending damage. Like, as long as you don't have to run away and back off, you can just keep changing targets and doing huge burst damage. Look at how much Slam does with Wrath of the Berserker in these talents. I don't even have the 40% Slam talent yet at level 16. I just did so much damage to those 3 players and they all got forced to run away. And as you can see, I'm not using Whirlwind for DPS at all. It's all about the Slam spam. Now this is one incredibly satisfying team fight, so hold on to your fedoras. Watch this damage. I'm just gonna spam slams on whoever I want. Prioritizing squishies, of course. First target the Sylvanas. Hit him with the Q, and then switch to the tank just because he's low. Why not? And then boom. Look what 3 slams does to a Vala. Boom. So much freaking damage. They would have even died much faster, but they were all stacked up, and Brightwing was actually using his Gust of Healing trait, the talent that he took, so he's actually pulsing huge heals around the entire team, and they still died that fast. But this is the general playstyle, even in team fights. As long as you're not getting your ass kicked and have to immediately pull out, you just pick the nearest squishy target and slam them, one by one, doing huge burst damage to them. But this is the general playstyle. You want to pop Wrath of the Berserker and then Q somebody to engage, and then just slam spams on whatever near squishy targets you can hit, and you do tons of burst damage. And with Wrath of the Berserker, not only are you doing 40% more damage on everything, but you're very hard to control. They can't peel you very well because you have 50% CC reduction while Wrath of the Berserker is up. And Wrath of the Berserker has insane uptime too, because you can constantly refresh its duration by generating more Fury. A lot of the time you can keep it as long as the entire cooldown. And as you can see, oh, the damages. I mean, Wrath of the Berserker is amazing. 40% all damage, and it has such incredible uptime. Now, like I said earlier, Leap isn't bad or anything, but that's more of a coordinated team kind of ability. If your team is not totally in sync and know how to follow up with it, it's a lot harder to get use out of it. And you're giving up 40% damage almost all the time during fights, and 50% CC reduction. I just think Wrath of the Berserker is generally the better choice. And then my last tip is, get used to poking a lot. You don't always have to fully engage just because you land your spear. She's really good at just doing a Q, W, or a couple of Ws and then getting out. You can do a ton of damage just poking like this, and eventually once you whittle them down, you can finally commit to finish off the kill. A lot of people think, oh, I landed a Q, I gotta go balls deep until I die now, or till they die, but that's not true. Just poke around until the opportunity's right, recover health with Whirlwind whenever you can in the minion waves, and you back off, and then go back in and finish off the kill eventually. As you can see, you don't have to commit and dive on the walls, you just poke around a bit until you're ready for an actual team fight. Here, my whole team isn't here, and there's too many enemies. I'm just going to recover some health in the minion wave, and then I'm going to land my Q and do some nice poke burst. Boom, QW. That's a lot of poke. So, you know, when you're not able to fully commit, just poke whatever you can. Hit some slams here or there safely, and then back off. I didn't take that much damage, and I dealt a pretty good amount. Now, before we're finished, I'm going to go over some final thoughts about talents, because I know there's going to be some questions. I think Warpaint is really bad, because mid-combat, block is going to prevent more damage than Warpaint will typically heal, because you're, again, not able to stand there and auto-attack very much. People are going to be kiting you, or you're going to have to be poking and running away. So I think block mitigates more damage, and is a lot more helpful to survive than Warpaint. And then Shot of Fury is a really good talent a lot of the time if you don't feel that you need any extra defensive power. I almost always take block. The Shot of Fury I take sometimes. Now, normally in a fight, if I land my spear and I'm constantly attacking, I don't feel like I need any extra Fury most of the time. But the reason it's so nice is because if you miss your spear, you can activate Shot of Fury and start slamming people anyway. Now, Aftershock versus Mystical Spear. In the last patch, they buffed Mystical Spear a bit. It's always a -4 seconds off the cooldown, and that seems really tempting because that's a very important ability, so being able to use it more often is freaking awesome. But honestly, the Mystical Spear, especially if you're not taking the longer range on your spear, which I don't recommend anyway, it doesn't help you to escape that often. A lot of the time you're going to use it to engage, and then by the time you need to escape, you're probably already dead and it's too late anyway before the cooldown comes back up. So rarely I find it useful for escaping. And a lot of the time, if you miss your spear, it's going to pull you in where your spear missed. And that can be really dangerous. A lot of the time you don't want to be pulled into the enemy, especially when you don't have Fury to start smacking them. And then lastly, the level 16 talents. They're all viable options depending on what you're fighting, but generally speaking, I take Furious Blow because that significantly increases your burst. Now, I have to experiment with No Escape a bit more because I honestly feel like it might have some really good potential because it can help you chase a lot with that extra movement speed, and it can also help you get away after poking. So feel free to experiment with it if you like. Maybe you'll find that you like No Escape a lot better. For now, I definitely know Furious Blow is a good option. But anyway, that concludes this guide on how to play Sonya. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative. I have been loving playing Sonya lately. I used to just stay away from her because everybody said she was super weak all the time. But after playing her a bunch more and learning more about her strengths and weaknesses, I find that she is insanely fun. She's easily one of my favorite heroes to play all of a sudden. Anyway guys, that is it for this video. Feel free to follow my stream at twitch.tv/TosenTribe. I always answer questions in chat when I can. And don't forget to subscribe to Focus Fire's YouTube channel for more guides to come. Thanks for watching as always, and peace out.